Naomi Booth. Her latest book is Exit Management. It's another one of those pandemic releases from last year, published by Dead Ink. And we'll talk to Naomi in a little bit about this, what it feels like to publish something during the pandemic. And we know from experience here on the book club that sometimes frustrating for authors because these books should get a lot of traction and they don't, and online presentations are not the same as physical world presentations. Of course, we here at the Second Life Book Club beg to differ because our type of presentation is even more inclusive than a physical world presentation because we're a global operation. Anyways, absolutely magnificent read, Exit Management. I'm totally blown away. And also, this is possibly one of the best titles for a novel I have encountered in a long time. As we dive into the plot and welcome Naomi, you will see how brilliant this is. And you know what? Let's do this. Let's ask the audience here and on YouTube and on Twitter, where we're streaming. Let me ask you, what do you associate with the term exit management? And I think you'll be quite surprised as we go deeper into the plot without spoilers. What exit management can refer to and does in the context of this book. So please type it in local chat in Second Life, and I'll pick it up from there. In YouTube, we welcome our viewers. You can also put it into the YouTube chat. I'll monitor it there. We're today in a very posh upper class club of sorts, old world vibes. Oh, Jessica here already puts into the local chat. He says exit management. She associates organized bathroom breaks. Now that is a good one. Very topical. We're here in Club Budapest, and the art on the wall. I want to mention this before we go into the discussion. The art on the wall here is abstract art by a Second Life artist, Judy Lin. And you can actually buy it from her website. You can buy it in Second Life if you go to her place. I hope that maybe Shiloh or Ruby can put the link into the local chat of her website. So all the art that you see is by Judy Lin. She focuses on abstract art. And if you look out the window, you will see the Blue Mountains of New South Wales in Australia. Now, what does this all have to do with our guest? What does it have to do with body horror? What does it have to do with eco horror, with cli-fi, with neoliberalism? I don't know, but we'll find out. Naomi is standing up. Her avatar is standing up. Is very nervous. What's her first day?
I'm
Let's warm welcome, Naomi. How are you? Welcome. Thanks for
oh,
coming.
thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Yeah, my avatar was about to run for the hills at the prospect of covering all of those big topics.
Well, you're
But
an
thank you,
academic. I mean,
Drax.
we're not academics here. You have a doctor title, so we're assuming that you're an expert in all these things.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, I will do my best.
Now, exit management, and the camera can see this. We have it here on the table and also on the floor, sort of littered around a little bit. Um,
Mhm.
Exit management is an amazing read. It's really incredible. I mean, congratulations to I mean, going into sort of a space plot wise that is has been covered by other people in other contexts, and you do something extremely fresh here. It's very, very dark, but it
Mhm.
ends in a very hopeful way. And I realized today that it's actually also kind of a love story with these two, call them kids, young people, in within a really brutal late stage capitalism setting. There's tragic deaths are involved here. Let me very briefly do a synopsis, and then I'll ask you to rate my synopsis. So the milieu is London. It's the world of high finance, investment bankers, commodity traders, people who make, can I swear on this program? Yes, shitloads of money.
Mhm.
Lauren, one of the main protagonists, works in the HR department. She's in charge of firing people in a quote unquote clean way so that they cannot sue the company. So this is really interesting. She is when somebody is deemed to be fired, a traitor, mostly because he just doesn't make the money for the company that is he's contractually obligated to making. Then then he has to be appearing with this HR person, with Lauren, and she goes through the motions in a very sort of structured way to fire before is fired, so he cannot go back and say, "Hey, there was a procedural something wrong, and I want more settlement or whatever," right? And the other character is Callum. He works for Guest House, which is kind of an Airbnb for super rich people, and he's prepping these multi-million pound homes in metropolitan London for visitors. These are empty homes, by the way. These are empty apartments, and visitors from out of town. These could be super rich people from maybe from the oil business. These could be drug dealers. This could be people maybe filming a high class porn movie. They rent these houses for the day, for the week, and Callum sort of preps this and then hands over the keys to these visitors. And both these characters come from working class, in one case, a little bit dysfunctional family backgrounds, and they live in this glamorous world. And that's where the story unfolds. Then there is a third protagonist. But what would you add? I went way too long. Can you explain the premise of your book in 12 seconds?
In 12 seconds. Oh,
15?
goodness. Oh, I'm losing time already, aren't I? I think you did a good summary of the milieu of the novel. I suppose I always thought of it as a novel about a triangular relationship. So there are these two characters who are drawn to one another, Callum and Lauren, but Callum also has a great attachment to an older character called Joseph, a Hungarian emigre who is living in London. So for me, this is partly about an intergenerational relationship to
Hmm.
London as well, and some of the differences between Callum and Lauren's experience of London and Joseph's. I also think it's about care work in some respects, and Callum becomes a kind of carer for Joseph, and the different sort of connotations of care within the novel are interesting to me.
Right. That is actually really, really something very important. So Joseph is comes to the US. I'm saying comes to the UK from Hungary. He flees the in the mid 50s, early 60s, where a lot of people from Hungary fled when the Soviet Union came in and become much more repressive. And
Hmm.
he is elderly, and he actually asks Callum to be his live-in nurse, basically. And the interesting
Hmm.
thing is also that Callum is enamored with the wealth, but he has not lost touch with his roots, and he loves his history that he learns from Joseph, and he says, yes, and he takes on this very difficult task to care for a person who is sick, and it's a matter of time when he dies.
Hmm. Yeah, I think you're right, and there is something about the artistic glamour of Joseph's life that Cal is attracted to, and part of that glamour is to do with wealth as well. But I think, in my imagining at least, it's also that connection to a sense of history and a sense of European history, which Callum has perhaps not received in his education, has not received in his conversations or relationships with his family. Cal is actually a failed history student, so he tried to go to university and didn't thrive at university and left. But this is a way through Joseph that he feels part of a bigger history, I suppose.
What is really interesting is that Lauren hates history and Callum really
Yeah.
loves it.
Yeah.
Lauren really buys into this whole thing of that the history doesn't matter. All that matters is the future and the outcome. The outcome is all that matters. I forgot that sentence is in your book. I forgot who says it. I think her boss says it, or maybe Lauren says it. But what is so fascinating, Naomi, is that it occurred to me. I don't think it's a new insight, but the people who are so buying into this. ultra fast capitalism and the future matters and the outcome matters. I actually think that they don't really think about the future. I think they're totally obsessed with the present.
Interesting.
I mean,
Yeah,
they
I
deny
may.
the past. They deny
Yeah,
that the past has any significance. The past is slowing them down. They need to move fast. They need to make a lot of money. But frankly, Lauren doesn't really look into the future much, frankly. I think she's totally obsessed with the present, with appearance, whatever that entails. She's so obsessed with how she's perceived in this
mm,
world that nobody notices that she comes from this slightly dirty background of working people, of dysfunctional people.
yeah. So I should maybe say at this point that Lauren comes from West Yorkshire and has moved to London, as is the sort of time-worn trope to make a new life to follow her professional opportunities. And the north south divide is still something that is, well, it doesn't go away in British politics, and became even more pressing once again in the run up to the Brexit vote. There was this sense of the left behind regions of the UK, and I suppose Lauren is literally leaving behind the town that she grew up in, which happens to be the town that I grew up in,
I was just going to say
Dewsbury,
that's where you
a
are.
West Yorkshire town.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't live there anymore, but that's where I grew up, and like many towns
So when you
in the
say that
north
for
of
people who are
England.
not in the UK, Jerry here in the local chat says actually hooray for West Yorkshire. But what's that divide? I mean, is that a working
Yeah.
class divide and the rich folks are down south or
I mean, as Jerry's already sort of pointing out in his comment, I think the north-south divide is often very badly simplified, and it can be a rural and a city thing. And in fact, the north is an incredibly diverse area that includes enormous rural areas as well as big cities like Manchester, Leeds, Sheffield. But broadly speaking, the way in which the North and South are used in political debate in the UK is to talk about working class interests being
Mhm.
allied with the North. Also, I think, yeah, in a way that doesn't do justice to widespread poverty in the south. There's
Yeah.
plenty of poverty within London. There's plenty of poverty in the regions outside of London, but we do have a strange situation in the UK. I think an unusual situation in terms of the level of concentration of wealth in certain areas of London, and also the concentration of our national life in other ways, culturally and elsewhere. But broadly speaking, West Yorkshire in particular is an area that has suffered in the era of post-industrialisation and suffered in the post-1980s era after Thatcher. Many areas in Yorkshire were dependent on coal mining. So to give you a kind of a sense for people outside of the UK, that north and south is often used as a shorthand for the divide between those deindustrialised areas in the north that have suffered from poverty, and the kind of metropolitan, cosmopolitan, thriving south.
The that move. And I just wanted to say, and thank you for you mentioned it, but I think viewers of this program are aware that we look at things here in a nuanced way, and then when I mentioned like what's the perception of these places, just like in the U.S., this is obviously used in the political realm in extremely oversimplified ways, and there's these pockets within the divide. I mean, I don't have to go into detail that when the analysis after Trump got elected was so unbearingly simplistic that, oh, these are just poor people in these areas that are pissed off that globalization stole their jobs and they voted for Trump. Um, as you mentioned in London, I just want to throw up real quick a collage that our researcher Shyla prepared, because obviously in these big cities, the divide between rich and poor is just tremendous. Here are just a
Hmm.
couple of images that I've found on Google. Croydon,
Yeah.
where there is some social housing. This is where your protagonist Callum lives, and then on the bottom are a few images from Eglin Mews. I think is Eglin Mews the stand-in of the Muse in your book? Is that supposed to be Eglin Mews?
Uh, I was
Because it's
thinking of
called
it.
Elgin
Yeah,
Mews.
Elgin. Yeah, it wasn't a direct stand-in, but
Ah, because
it's
I
interesting
found
that you
richer
found
homes
that.
in Eglin Mews. I was looking like, where
Aha.
is Elgin Mews? And then I thought these are not even like 5 million pounds. These need to be richer areas. But anyway, the
Mm.
point is that that the division between rich and poor is is just insane all over the board, and to just lump it into very broad geographic areas, I think that does nobody any good who wants to solve these problems. No.
Yeah, I think you're right, and is also potentially a way to pit people against one another who would be allies. Coming back to something we spoke about a bit earlier before the show. Uh, I think that there are opportunities for solidarity between North and South that sometimes get lost by that dividing. But that's not to say there aren't real barriers in place for certain, in certain respects in the north, and a specific history of certain things being neglected and left behind. But and I will stop talking about Brexit at some point in my
No, I
life,
think
I'm sure, but not yet.
but what's important, what is
um,
important, I think it's related because with with the argument of the meritocracy, this is something that I literally talk about every day within my family and with friends, because in Germany and the US, two places I lived, I don't have experience with the UK, but the meritocracy thing, or the concept, is that everybody can sort of make it, and the US has their own
mhm,
version.
mhm.
And that's why I want to ask you about the UK, because in with your protagonists, they have made it to some extent. I mean, they're sort of buying into it, but they also have the personality. Certainly, Lauren has that personality to be fairly
Yeah.
ruthless. I mean, what is required to really climb the ladder? Um,
Mhm.
I'm throwing up a little quote here from your book. This is sort of Lauren's interior monologue. She says, "A clean meritocracy, your worth in the work that you do, the revenue you bring in." I mean, that's her world.
Mhm. Yeah.
She puts the work in and she gets the money out. So it's a very clean equation. And she says, "You're fulfilling your defined function," and she's fine with that. And then she says, "Isn't the city uh, proof of progress, proof that things can be clean and fair?" And for her, that means where she came from, it's not fair, it's not
Yeah.
clean, and here it's
Yeah.
clean and it's fair.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And she has bought in, to use the language of capitalism. She's bought into that fantasy that if you work hard enough, you can win the system, and that the system allows you to do that. If you are willing to do certain things, and that system is clean and fair in some way. But I think what the novel hopefully does is reveal that is a delusion that she has built because she is so desperate to escape the idea of the possibility of things not being fair. I see Lauren as a character who can't really bear the thought of suffering or
Hmm.
inequality.
Hmm.
And as a result of that, she wants to move away from that. This is where I do think of her as future focused, even though you're right, she doesn't imagine the future. She's bound up in the present. But that for me is her sort of attempt to move away from the possibility of unfairness. And she can't, you can't imagine Lauren doing the caring work, for example, that Callum does, because she
Right.
cannot sit with the possibility of suffering. her own suffering from the past. She's desperately trying to repress and move on from, and the way in which other people might also be the victim of unfair processes. She can't live with that, and so I see her as a particular kind of person who wants to believe in a sometimes quite vicious manner that if you do the right things, you will be okay. And those people who haven't are the people who aren't doing those things.
Personal responsibility, the fetish of personal responsibility.
Yeah.
Oh yes, and that's
Yeah.
that's very well put, because again, as we said before, and we're going to go to readings in a minute. I know people always like, oh, Draxler, well, we want to hear the guest read. We want to get a sense of the prose and stuff like that. We'll get to that in a second, because it's important that that relationship between, or the difference between Lauren and Callum. Callum is completely ready to care for others. He's completely ready to, with Joseph, to become his caregiver at his end of life care, which is very difficult. But then, and I'm not going
Hmm.
to spoil it, but then Lauren does something that is somewhat shocking, but also it's a logical thing that she does. Uh, I'm gonna say exit. She does an exit management type thing. And
Hmm.
folks, you really need to pick up this book, because it's just so good. And she does that. She does not see later. She reflects on it, but what she does, she feels is necessary.
Hmm. Yeah.
And Callum
And
could not do this.
yeah, and in fact, I think she believes that she's the kind of person who does the things that need to be done, but that other people can't do.
Hmm.
And in a way, she's doing the labor
She's a
that other
manager.
people benefit from. Yeah, yeah. And she's a worker in the sense of she is sent to do the dirty work. In a number of different ways, she does the difficult jobs and tries to make them clean.
I can relate to both of them. If you're just tuning in, this is Naomi Booth
Mm.
here on the Second Life Book Club today. Her latest book is Exit Management, out from Dead Ink. Absolutely astonishing book. And we actually do have someone in the audience from Yorkshire, I guess. Jerry McNell. He says, well, he said
Mm.
earlier, hooray for West Yorkshire. He says, as well as the North South thing, it's the rural city thing, um, this sort of division. And it feels like the decisions are all made for us down south. So
Mm.
that's how you guys feel up there, right? You have no say, and London just calls the shots politically. We're
That
jumping
yeah
back and
that
forth, and now I feel like, as I said this, as it's coming out of my mouth, Naomi, I don't want you to trigger you to go back to your Brexit trauma. I don't want to trigger that trauma. I should have given a trigger warning.
Well, I think that is often the perception, yeah, and at the same time that there's this weird attempt now to to predict what the working class of the North wants. So you have politicians attempt, and Boris Johnson did this very successfully, supposedly at the last election, and managed to persuade areas of the North that had never voted or hadn't voted Tory for a long time to vote Conservative. But it's yeah, I think it's built on a lot of supposition, and uh, also a sense, certainly something that I felt very strongly after the Brexit vote, was that certain metropolitan, there really was, I think, an urban rural divide in the Brexit vote, but also a sense in the South that the North was responsible for Brexit. That
Exactly.
London should separate from the rest of the country without any real sense of yeah, how varied people's feelings were, and of also the situation which people might be in that would lead them to think that that was a good solution. That's a I think for that slogan, take back control, to have had the power that it did, you have to feel really, really disempowered.
Yeah.
For that
Yeah.
to hit home in the way that it did, you know, yeah.
Very similar situation um, in the U.S. and Germany, the other two spheres that I'm familiar with. Now let's go read because you
Yeah.
prepared reading from the very beginning, so we don't
Yeah.
need to set up a lot. Although I do want to say that in the beginning we get introduced to Lauren, and Lauren is apartment hunting. I'm assuming she wants to buy or rent. I don't know how much money she makes in that position. I mean, it could be that even in her sort of high powered firm, she doesn't make enough money to buy something in London. I hear it's crazy down there.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you'll get a sense of this from the bit that I read. But yeah, there is a sense in which her hopes and expectations in buying a property are not being met by the sorts of properties within within
Within her
her.
range.
Yeah.
Mhm. Uh,
Yes.
That's absolutely brilliant. That's a brilliant way of bringing her into the story right from the beginning. The kind of aspirations. Uh,
Hmm.
and now I feel like you're right. She does think about the future, and she's not realizing her present, her place. But
Mm.
anyways, please, if I could ask you to stand up and carefully go
Sure.
to the book display here, and the book display magically appeared. I know this creates a little
Oh,
anxiety among our guests, but we do a type of virtual trauma therapy here in Second Life. We expose the guest to a
let me try to walk.
I think I'm gonna
Right.
move the book display to you. People have told me like Draxter, why don't you let the guests just have the book attached to them and they don't have to walk forward? I said, well,
Do you know coordination is not my strength in real life either, so this is very fitting. Oh, thank
see,
you.
the book
Okay.
display is coming to you. There you go.
Oh, amazing. Is this, am I in an okay position?
Yes.
Okay.
You hit the escape key and then you look straight into the book. Here we go. So we're hearing
Lovely.
right from the beginning exit management, and here we go. This is Naomi Booth.
2018 Elgin Muse. 3 bad things before breakfast. 1. The child in the flat next door wakes up crying again. He sleeps on the other side of the wall and has a cough like a seal bark. Several coughs in a row, and then he can't catch his breath and he'll start to bark sob. No one responds when he cries like this. The rent for her apartment is astronomical. Luxury studio in outer Greenwich, the particulars had said. But now here she is in a bedsit in Deptford, sardined between this sick, sad kid and, on the other side, an old woman with alcohol-related psychosis who screams in the night, "Where am I? Where am I?" Until she calls the concierge, who calls the woman's daughter in Portsmouth, who calls 999 to have her intermittently sectioned. 2. Her tiredness means she reverts to bad habits. Coffee shop, 3 sugars, social media surfing. Her mauve nail hovering, fingertip cushioning against the silk surface of the screen. She's scrolling past minor calamities. Why Kate can wear a tiara but Meghan can't. Alison Mack went from hungry actress to brutal sex slave leader. Countdown to Brexit. What happened next? Then she's clicking through to a story about plastics. This time, it's photographs of dead birds. Like a crime scene shot, the outline of an albatross chick on wet sand, its feathers just beginning to fray away, its bones exposed, and where its stomach must once have been a clutch of hard, bright objects, yellow and red bottle tops, a turquoise toothpick, a bright blue ring pole, and other smaller objects, no longer recognisable. The caption on the image reads, "One-third of albatross chicks on the Pacific island of Medway die from plastic consumption. The parent birds bring the objects home from sea to feed their young." 3. Spiral of doom. The kid next door is really coughing now. She can hear him above the noise of the coffee machine, keening with each attempt to inhale. Looking again at the albatross chick, at the concentric deadly objects in its tummy. Single-use objects that never go away. That piece of chewing gum she swallowed as a child, the end of a coral coloured gel nail she'd bitten off in a meeting and swallowed before thinking. And that night back in 2008 in the alleyway outside Roxy's in Bradford, when she'd insisted on a condom and she'd seen the empty foil packet on the floor, but no condom had re-emerged post-coitus. So where was it? The thought of this missing prophylactic had returned to her every few months for the last 10 years. Had it been discarded or removed backhandedly beforehand, or was it lost inside her somewhere, still there a decade on, with the childhood chewing gum and the acrylic nail and all of the other deadly durable objects that her body can't digest? An email is blinking on her phone, the first good thing of the day. This one is going to go fast. Lauren, you need to see it ASAP. There's a fine rain across the busy high street like static interference. 3 black girls in school uniform at the bus stop outside the tube station are screaming, then laughing. There's a florist and a bougie furniture shop and a pizza express. A school on the corner, and in front of it a small shrine table with cards and teddy bears and candles. Down a side street, 3 Range Rovers are parked in a row, and at the end of the street, some way off, she catches a glimpse of the tower, Grenfell, draped in white, the skyscraper shroud with the green heart. She follows the blue line on her phone, turns onto a side street. Trees grow from squares cut out of the pavement here. When she arrives at the next intersection, she stops. Little incursions of rot in the wet petals of the cherry tree above her. She stopped ordering cut flowers to try to cheer up her flat. That way the petals begin to go, dappled with brown. You spend 30 quid on a bouquet only to watch it turn to a vase pocked with melanoma. There's a tall white guy coming towards her. He leads with his chin, which is unusually sharp, a downturned ace of spades. Hi, Lauren, I'm Ash. Great to meet you. Let's walk and talk, he says. I've been brought up to speed on your situation by the office. You know, your budget is at the lower end of what's possible in this area, but I don't discriminate, not at all. But you do need to keep an open mind. He leads her towards a tall Victorian house. Nice front, hey? He says. She climbs the staircase behind him, a staircase that goes up and up, bending tightly. And on the 5th floor, there's a tiny dark stretch of landing. Now, I haven't seen this one myself yet, Lauren, but it sounds perfect for you. He's unlocking the door to a small square of a room. He turns on the light switch, which fails to ignite. The bulb hung naked from the ceiling. In one corner, there's a single bed. In the diagonally opposite corner, a standalone cooker abutted by a low camping table. In the centre of the room, there are 2 deck chairs and a record player. There's an extremely strong smell of skunk, with top notes of semen. So many unpleasant revelations in the search for a flat so far. She's seen morbid obsessions filling walls and cabinets and display cases, collections of painted plates, of military memorabilia, of framed pictures, of guide dogs, of fighting knives. She's seen a miniature shrine to Princess Diana, old blood smeared on walls, old blood mattered into carpets. But the proximity with the masturbatory habits of strangers is the very worst. Ash is striding over to a small window and opening it. You need to imagine this place with a woman's touch, he's saying. I can already tell you that you'd make it beautiful. I think it's got a real Parisian vibe. A slight quirk is that the bathroom's 1 floor down. It's not going to work for me, Lauren says. That's a real shame, Ash says, looking hurt. That wounded pose that men who are good at sales and sexual coercion have mastered. Well, onwards and upwards. I like a challenge, Lauren.
And that's Naomi Booth reading from Exit Management. Big round of applause. This is a wonderful excerpt bringing Lauren in, and we're going to go very quickly to the second
Thank
exit,
you.
I think. And people have said, you may have missed this here. Saul says, LOL, the missing condom concern. And Jessica says, exit management. So I think people are getting the hang of the multiple possibilities to interpret the term exit management.
Yep.
So why
Yeah, I'm
was it
glad that
important
that.
to you to start the book like this with Lauren, to introduce her before we actually see her at work, before we see her in her function? You introduce her in the context of apartment hunting in London. What does it show the reader?
I think I really wanted to be quite immersive with how the novel moves between the two points of view between Callum and Lauren. And I really wanted from the very start to kind of drop right into them and give you that sense of their interior life, if you like. So that opening, I hope that opening gives a sense of not just what she's doing, which is trying to find a place that she can afford to buy in a kind of aspirational area in London, but also the sense of what she's trying to avoid by doing that. And this is something I think
Hmm.
about a lot in my writing. I often think that the most interesting things about us as human beings and also about characters are the things that they can't admit to themselves. And this causes an interesting challenge, I think, when you're writing novels, because there are certain things you want the reader to know about your characters that they can't know about themselves, or they perhaps can't express about themselves. So through that idea of the lost object, the lost condom, and the anxiety about the bird that's consuming plastic, I really wanted to give a sense of the way in which she's haunted by the possibility of pollution,
Hmm.
but never stays still long enough to think about that. Is always moving away from it.
It's a matter also, she is a person that values control. It's very important. We mentioned that control is very,
Yeah.
very important for her. And I actually pulled an excerpt that I found really cool. If the camera can move towards the display here in the back, this is a rare towards the end of the book where there's a tremendous amount of stress on her because of various things that occur. She blows up at a temp at her work, and that's really kind of the only one. The only time where she in public really sort of blows up like that, because that's her job is all about being even keeled and being professional, and
Hmm.
not being phased by the fact when she fires those traders that they break down crying. um, I'm going to read this here, and she blows up at this temp. She says, and the temp, by the way, she narrates like her everything. She constantly sort of speaks to herself. Now I have these colored pencils. I'm putting them over here. That's how I imagine her. And then Lauren says, Molly, we don't need to know what you're thinking every moment of the day. We don't need to know that you like the taste of envelope glue, or the exact temperature of your hands, or how asparagus colors your urine. No one cares where you're going on your hollybubs, or how you like your steak cooked. You're a temp. Do you understand? It means that you're temporary. Thank God we don't have to hear all of this on a permanent basis. So she totally loses it here, and then she gets reprimanded by the boss, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I suppose her her desire to be in control, and I am doing a few spoilers here, but it is not possible for her to remain in control in any sense
Yeah.
of any of the things she's trying to control. And I suppose the novel builds towards that catastrophic, or a series of catastrophic revelations in which she's not able to control events in the way that she hopes.
And the end is healing. This is my spoiler. I find it quite healing, but I also found One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest actually very positive. While a lot of my friends go, Draxtor, are you nuts? Are you mental? I thought it was a tale of great sort of freeing yourself from the
Okay.
system. That's how I interpret it. It's just an aside here. Dr. Booth, maybe you
I
want to analyze that
Yeah.
later.
Well, the book ends with the word hope. And I think probably with everything I've written, it's been the ending that I've agonized over most,
Yeah,
and the right balance between hope and despair. I feel that I wanted it to feel like we were on the cusp of something at the end here, which could go either way, but where there is at least the possibility of hope.
yeah.
It's Joseph's words at the very end. So there is also something, I think. I don't want to spoil your optimistic reading, Drax. I like your optimistic reading
The
a
very
lot.
end. Sorry to step in here
Mm.
because at the big here we actually have it at the club. People can explore it later. We put it on the wall here. The last sentence in the book is, or the last
Oh,
two sentences, "You are alive, aren't you? So there is hope. You're alive,
mm.
aren't you? So there is hope." And those are Joseph's words. Sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah, exactly. Thank you. But there's also, uh, I think, a bit of a sort of, for me anyway, a slightly eerie sense to those words as well. The novel, one of the novels that I have loved most in my life, which is a bit of a cliche as a northern writer, is Wuthering Heights, and
Hmm.
I always remember the end of that novel where the narrator says, "Who could imagine unquiet souls above this moortop," and gives a kind of description of the beauty of the harebells and other things on the moortop. But of course, that's sort of tempting, tempting us to feel that that's not true. It is. We do feel that the moortops are full of unquiet souls and are kind of haunted. And I suppose I'm striving for a similar
Mm.
effect here, which is I want to say there is hope, but it's always haunted by gone before and the possibility that that hope won't be returned.
That's you know what? I love your endings. Let me tell you, I find your endings nuanced and brilliant. But I do have this question here that because I'm curious if you've been quote unquote accused of having sort
Mm.
of a sappy ending in exit management.
Snappy.
Sappy.
Sappy. Okay.
You
Well,
know, you
thank you,
got this
Jessica.
really
The
kind of
sleepers.
a severe subject matter and a lot of
Yeah.
stuff going on. We can't spoil it, but there's real trauma also for Lauren, and the way she deals with it is um yeah, it's heart wrenching. And then you end with something that I find very super appropriate and very well done and just perfect. But it occurred to me because I have this discussion with other friends and readers who I can picture a few people say like, yeah, that's really kind of like that's kind of a cheap cop out, like just like, oh my God,
Yeah.
how can she do that?
Yeah. I can see that. And I guess that's why.
A tear jerker. Tear jerker is maybe a better term.
This is why endings are so hard, Drax,
Mm,
because it's getting that balance, isn't it, of doing justice to the complexity of the characters and the issues, but also giving something that means. I think because I am not an optimist by nature,
mm-hmm,
I am always. I remember hearing someone speak about this and saying that either being too pessimistic or too optimistic gives the impression that the future is already written.
mm-hmm,
And either we're all screwed. Late capitalism is humanizing, and there's no way out for any of us. Or there'll be a way. There'll be a way. Something will come through. And either one of these sort of perhaps removes that space for the reader to come and make a decision about the future, about what
mm-hmm.
kind of a future we have or these characters have. So Sealed, which I know you've read, Drax, had
I
a
was just gonna
much
say maybe we should
if you
move
can
to that. Exactly, because you're mentioning your ambivalence, and I feel very similar. And you
yeah.
express this in there's a wonderful video of you talking at the Durham Book Festival, Ideas for Positive Change, and you're very
Oh
honest
yeah.
upfront about, like the uh, yeah, just like you said. I mean, there is the question is, how do you activate people through art, books, movies, or whatnot? How do you actually make them uh, believe again in a possibility of change? Because, and it's been pointed out many times, dystopian novels have something of
Mm.
actually shutting down a- uh, activism, because if you consume too much of it, you go like, it's all a foregone conclusion. We're going to go to hell. I might as well binge on dystopian fiction until it all sort of implodes.
This is the really you oh Drax, you're getting really to the big questions for me in
That's what we do
writing.
here. My name is Dr.
Yeah.
Exter, and let me just say, Sol here actually says in the local chat, I don't want to acknowledge this, says, I can't wait to read this. I'm seriously invested already. Um, you will love it. But let's talk about this,
Mm.
because again, you acknowledge the complexity of this question. Here's a quote from you.
Yeah.
You say, I think I've been drawn to dark genres, to the uncanny in particular, as a mode of exploring the climate crises. Now we're jumping into Sealed. I think perhaps I've written from a
Yeah.
place of climate anxiety. I'm interested in fiction that might be anxiogenic. I didn't even know that term exists, but that's cool. That might
Mm.
try to produce anxiety in the reader. But that's exactly the thing. If you create too much anxiety in the reader, is the reader really going to be activated to engage in social activism or in the political arena? Where is
Yeah.
that line? That's so difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, and the truth is, as I say in that talk, I don't know where that line is, but I'm always trying to think about it when I write, or increasingly I am. So See, which was my first novel, is a really horrible novel. It's as
Oh,
lots of
I'm
the marketing
traumatized.
at the
There's a
time said.
pregnancy. Oh my God. There's a giving birth scene in the last 30 pages. I just read it an hour before we started this show. I am traumatized, Naomi. There was no trigger warning. I'm a man. You subject me to this, though. I mean, it's brilliant.
Yeah,
Anyways, yeah.
it's not recommended reading if you're pregnant. That's probably true for all of my work, actually. But yeah, it's not a nice book, and I think, I mean, first of all, the process of writing is not so conscious that I sit down and think, oh, how can I make people anxious about about the environment? But it came from a place of my own anxiety, and actually of reading quite a lot of nonfiction. And I remember when the sort of seed of the idea for Sealed in my mind, and I was listening to a talk by a brilliant Australian writer called Rebecca Giggs. She gave a talk in the UK down in Brighton at the University of Sussex, and she was saying that one of the things that writers could do in terms of helping people to think and imagine was that people have a sense, some people at any rate, have a sense that what is happening to the environment is happening over there,
Hmm.
kind of literal way, in that they think it's happening in other parts of the world, or they think it's happening to other people. But more fundamentally, they think that what is happening to the environment is happening outside of their bodies. And she was saying the thing we've got to, or one of the powers of literature could be to show us that we are not separate from anything that's happening in the world. And she said, our skins are not a barrier, our skins are porous.
Mm.
Everything that is in our environment is in our bodies too. And I think really brought home in recent years with studies on what's now found, for example, in utero. So, microplastics in fetuses, an awful lot of chemicals in human breast milk. And those ideas just really got under my skin. And that was where the novel was born from. So to make any sort of calculation of what that does for other readers, but I suppose there's something necessarily map directly onto action that's also about how we think of ourselves in the world and about how we think of ourselves as in the world, you know, and not separate from it, that I was trying to do with that novel. But I have, you know, then come across a lot of interesting research from people who are trying to do this work of seeing whether reading cli-fi or reading particular novels, how that might relate to, yeah, to action. And it's complicated, with people saying that certain kinds of fictions can lead to despair.
I think that, yeah, and I mean, you know, when I classify, you know, since we're jumping on Sealed, into Sealed now, let me just briefly say Sealed is set in a fictional town in Australia, and the Alice is pregnant. She's about to give birth, and there is an epidemic happening, a very strange disease where your orifices sort of grow shut. So people wake up. I don't know how fast this goes, but they wake up and their eyes are basically grown shut. They can't see anymore, or their ears grow with new skin and they can't hear. I mean, it's absolutely horrific. This is really. I mean, I was a huge David Cronenberg fan. I love David Cronenberg's movies, The Fly, The Brood. I mean, the early movies, actually, this reminded me a little bit of The Brood. If you don't know The Brood, it's a late 70s movie about a woman who has severe anger issues, and she gives birth to her negative emotions. But anyway, this is about you, Naomi. So
Oh
Sealed,
wow.
uh, yeah, there's
I
some
will look that
parallels
up
there.
though. I will look that up.
It, it's
Yeah.
great. It's with Oliver Reed, some really good actors. But so
Mm.
Sealed, yeah, so people have this disease, and the woman who is pregnant, Alice, she feels very uneasy bringing a child into this world, and then there's the disease on top of it, and then is her, you know,
Mhm.
well-meaning but frankly quite annoying boyfriend who is taking things a little bit too loosely, to put it mildly. I mean, this guy. But the last 30 pages or so are insane in a good way. Now, this resonates with me. I find horror to be um, a great vehicle to look at social issues. A big George Romero fan, Night of the Living Dead, and so on.
Mm.
Um, but I recently heard, and I want your opinion on this. I recently heard a great discussion with an anthropologist from, she might be a sociologist from UC Irvine, Catherine Liu, and I work with people from over there, and it was about horror movies. And on the panel, there was a consensus that horror movies, especially we're talking about movies now, are quite conservative in their underlying messaging. So this is interesting. I don't know if you thought about this when you embarked on this genre here, if we call it horror with Sealed,
Mm.
um, because your message is, or your topic is an important one, and it's critiquing what we do with the planet, obviously. So I think it's not a it's not a conservative message at all. I mean, a politically conservative message. But yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I suppose I think horror is and why we actually want to watch and read horror is also fascinating to me. And I think those kind of classics of gothic and horror, like, you know, I think of Bram Stoker's Dracula, at the same time are, you know, sort of entrench certain conservative values. You know, in the end, the Dracula will be, you know, the vampire will be dispatched, and a certain kind of version of the heterosexual family will be re-entrenched, and you know, but to me the ending is sort of absolutely knocked off off its perch by the fact that we've luxuriated pages in the gory
Mm.
and really sexually charged kind of actions of the vampire and the kind of the sometimes even when horror appears to be entrenched in conservative values, there can be something more subversive at play in the audience's engagement with it.
Mhm.
But I'm also very aware of lots of feminist critiques of more contemporary horror, and there are lots of things that might happen in cliched horror that that don't excite me, and that
Yeah, yeah.
but
I mean,
but
the
at the
tropes of
same,
like Friday the 13th, you're just offing, sexually promiscuous kids. I mean, we're talking about sort of contemporary
yeah,
or that kind of thing. And you're absolutely right. I
yeah.
mean, there's just such a wide, such a wide range in that genre. I happen to be married
And
to a person who hates horror, but she also hates heavy metal, but we're
well,
still married after 20 years. So what's this?
I mean, this is the thing. I'm almost reluctant to talk about it because despite having written something that's often classed as eco horror,
Oh, did you not
I
classify
can't
it as that?
I didn't classify it as I wrote it, but I
Mhm.
think those are fair classifications kind of after the fact. But I can't stand much horror. I am very
Mhm.
easily scared. So I am in I think I'm so sensitive to this stuff. It really gets to me. So I don't read as widely as probably I should in terms of horror, because there are certain scenes that I've read that will stay with me for the rest of my life, and I
Naomi,
have to
you did
be
that
kind of
with your
careful
book Sealed.
about.
I'm sorry, I'm stepping on
Ah,
you here, but I gotta say, I know that I'm gonna not sleep. I'm gonna have nightmares today. This is astonishing, Naomi. You just I am a
well,
consumer of horror, or was in my a connoisseur of horror for a very long time. Um, uh, uh, in movies now, I don't watch much because I read all the time. But you have accomplished something with Sealed that I think if you put this in the hands of David Cronenberg and he makes a movie out of it, I don't think you will ever be able to watch your own movie.
well, I'm sorry about the nightmares. Not really sorry, but I will just say one last thing about that, which is that I also really wanted to write something about birth, and the process of giving birth. That
Mhm.
yeah, I'm on difficult territory here, because giving birth does not have to be a horror. I say this as someone who has given birth, but also just seems to me to be widely euphemized,
Yeah.
sanitized, removed from texts in any physicality. So, if nothing else, I think a truly kind of visceral account of birth.
That is really that is such an important aspect of this book as well, to kind of demystify this. And again, the boyfriend is probably uh of all the horrors that or the difficulties, the anxieties, the stress that a woman goes through during pregnancy and anticipating birth. Your character of Pete is probably more horrific
Mm.
than the than the disease you describe in the book, or the epidemic situation, the outbreak. Having a boyfriend like that who is this sort of clueless, naive, again, well-meaning, bumbling dude. That's pretty damn horrific.
Mm. I sometimes feel quite sorry for Pete. I think I hadn't quite realised how some readers feel really strongly about Pete, and how yeah, just how rubbish he is,
Well,
essentially.
I mean, he's complex too, and I actually said before the show, I can admit this. I see a part of Pete in me at the age maybe of like, I don't know, late teens, early 20s.
Yeah,
But I wasn't a father. I didn't have a pregnant girlfriend at the time. Let's put it that way.
yeah, and I think there's also a sense in which I think when you're pregnant, people want to things are going to be okay. And there is maybe a sense of that in him as
Right,
well.
exactly. And that's why he's very
Yeah,
well-meaning. I mean, he's
yeah,
always positive. He's just, but positive in this naive way. I mean, yeah,
mm.
he's very well-meaning. He says, it's going to be great. We're here outside in the country. We're away from the disease, from the outbreak. Hey, it's all good. Oh yeah, we don't have cell phone reception. That's fine. And I was like, what? You bring your pregnant girlfriend into a house with no cell phone reception? Are you kidding me? And you don't even know where the next
Yes.
hospital is. Hello. So Jerry McNally in
Yeah.
the chat says sealed is a different kind of tension to Rosemary's Baby than more physical. Oh, that's interesting. Are you aware? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so, Jerry. I think it is much more physical, and much more about the actual process as well as a source of kind of horror. I mean, partly the novel emerged from this idea about our skin being that border between us and a polluted world, but it also
Mm,
came out of just thinking a lot about pregnancy and just really conscious of how few well there are to represent this enormous passage in the lives of so many women. And in which almost every person I've met who has been pregnant in the late stages of pregnancy, possible that a baby can leave your body. There's
mm.
something weird that I think happens to a lot of people's minds in the late stages of pregnancy, where you just think it's not going to happen. This just doesn't seem plausible. When your bump is really enormous, and you think it's just not going to come out. And in a way, the novel is also just an attempt to create a horrific fable about that possibility that your body isn't going to release this baby. That that it, yeah, of a very
Ah,
common
I see. Oh
pregnancy
my God.
fear.
I can't say this without spoiling it, so I'm not going to say it, but I think now I realize you probably worked backwards in terms of the disease. And then, I see. Oh, that's
They
awesome.
came. They came. They came together. I would say, and yeah,
People in
but
the audience like,
yeah.
oh, I gotta read this. Okay, so let me just say that I have another quote here that I want to bring up because from your talk, and this is showing again how sort of nuanced this is and how the answers to does dystopian fiction eco horror cli-fi whatever is it good or bad, is it making us docile or makes us giving up on changes or not. This is a quote from you: rather than presenting the world as savable through technology or human action, eco horror encourages us to see the world as under threat and also as threatening. But Naomi, I mean, this leads me again to believe that you're more skeptical. Again, I mean, this is not. I don't see this as your job. You're not a. I think this is the job of politicians. I mean, this is a whole nother discussion. That what is the job of
Mm.
a novelist or an artist? Is it their job to change the world? I would say they can nudge us into the right direction, but ultimately it's up to us and politicians and elected officials to do that. But here you're basically saying that that genre is is furthering the our sense of not being able to do anything about the enormity of the issue.
Yeah, I don't know if I believe that, but I think that's one possible way of looking at it. There are these more optimistic genres, like solar punk, as a world in which technology has come to the rescue,
Mm,
and humans are living in a is sustainable, which is enabled by some sort of human intervention, or usually some sort of technology that has allowed us to sort of reverse the climate crisis, or do something wonderful. And I've got a lot of respect, and I hope it's true as well. I hope solar punk is predictive predicting the future, but I can't really dwell there emotionally. Those yeah, those works. I think there needs to be a full range of works because,
Mm.
again, I suppose it comes back to that idea of we don't know how this is going to be, how this is going to play out, and to be either too hopeful or too pessimistic feels to me potential to take away that sense of agency of the of the future truly being unwritten. Uh,
I see it, because it closes it either way. It just closes
yeah,
off the options of being open in any which way. It gives sort of it shuts the door to the imagination, is what you're saying. I guess the also this
yeah,
quote, now I understand more, Naomi, as you were laying it out, what you were trying to do with what you were trying to do with Sealed as well. So you were not necessarily in the back of your mind sort of a advocacy horror writer that had sort of the underlying message. Let's do something about global pollution with this book. So it was much more of a different impetus because yeah.
yeah. I mean, I remain pretty agnostic myself about that sort of mapping of action. I'd love to believe it was true that someone would read the novel and I think the pleasures of novel reading are complicated uh, and I think what you said back there, Drax, really opened up something for me actually, which was just the possibility to imagine different things. And that I think is one of the responsibilities of the novelist.
Hmm.
Next is, someone else, hopefully, along with the author, but it's collective, isn't it? What happens after the process of reading a novel?
I think that's where we can all agree. This is very educational for me. Also, really, this program, it always is here on the Second Life Book Club. But because I'm struggling with these questions as well. What's the role? What's my role? What's the role of different people in this whole sort of, if
Mm,
the project is to help us survive and thrive and not feel stuck and not succumb to the message that my grandmother often used to say, well, it's just how it is and that's how it always will be. She was just sort of, my grandma was a great person, but that's just what she just used to say, probably without a lot of reflection. That was just sort of a saying, right? I mean, that's in every language,
yeah.
there's a saying like that. And when people say that, sometimes you're like, think about what we're saying. I mean, we have these weird sort of sayings that
Mm,
cement this, what we're being conditioned to believe, frankly.
yeah. There's a nice northern saying for you here, Drax, which it'll be reet.
Oops,
Some people say, which
I think we're losing Naomi.
is. Oh, can you hear me?
Naomi, sound connection slight dragging. Okay, good old internet. Naomi, you're back.
Oh, sorry. Okay, great.
Uh-oh. Have we
Am I
lost her?
okay?
Paging Naomi.
I'm
Sounds good
here.
here. I can't.
Oh dear. I see. Okay. Right. Thank you. Thank you.
The Second Life Book Club with Naomi Booth, and we are mm, pushing up against the clock. We already pushed against the clock, but as of late, we've always wrapped in the post show into the normal stream, meaning that the entire stream show for everybody is basically 90 minutes. In the olden days, we used to do a 60-minute stream and plus a 30-minute post stream hangout for the exclusive VIP club here in Club Budapest. Budapest. Am I right? So we have Naomi back. Please continue. Where
Hi.
were we?
Oh, yeah. Good question, actually, Drex.
I don't even remember.
I've lost track of where we were. Um,
Well, sort of the notion
yeah.
of being conditioned to believe that, I mean, there's this famous book by Fukuyama, like
Oh,
The End of
yeah.
History, which is pretty much bullshit.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, and I was sharing a saying from the north of England, which is, "Oh, it'll be reet," which
Oh,
means it'll be okay, which is a kind of don't worry, it's unnecessary to worry about anything. Things will be reet, just which feels to me like that sort of complacency writ large.
see,
You
Jerry and
know,
Jessica, they know what you're talking about. They're putting this here in the local chat. It'll be Reed. She'll be Reed. But
yeah,
see, for me, as a German, the Germans are more sort of like, more sort of I guess sort of it's the cliche, more pessimistic and everything. To me,
yeah.
that just sounds like something like, helping someone to feel a little better. Well, I mean, it's
Well,
well-meaning.
yeah, I don't know. If we are going back to cliches of the north of England, one
We
is that
have
we
to.
are, one is that we're quite dour. We're quite, for our enthusiasm. So I think
Ah,
it'll be but yeah, you could see it as that kind of attempt to be comforting, but I think it overlaps a little bit with the sort of, well, it will just be how it is, it'll sort itself out.
I see. Without any
That's
input, without
that kind of
any
thing.
agency, without I see.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that connotation, that is to me quite depressing when it's expressed. The Germans have a something like that as well. Uh, um,
Yeah.
Let me look here at my run sheet. If you want to read a little bit from Sealed, maybe we'll skip the second reading from
Yeah, sure.
Exhibition and read Sealed. And I don't know, I don't have it on the book stand here. Maybe our super fast super fast producer can just whip up. I didn't prepare the Sealed backdrop because the book is still exit management. But as you're getting your reading ready, let me just put up a um, a little excerpt that I prepared. And this is a little excerpt here from Sealed. It's first
Thank
person
you.
narration. Alice is speaking here, the pregnant woman. By the way, there's several different covers of Sealed, and I think they're all absolutely
Mm,
excellent. So we already have changed the book cover. This is a really cool cover. The
thank you.
covers are all awesome. But anyway, this is Alice speaking. Here she says, and she's talking about her state of being pregnant. In these moments when I think about what's inside me, I still can't believe it. I can't believe those weird parts we saw on the screen. She was just at the doctor with her boyfriend. We saw the weird parts we saw on the screen will add up to a person. Right now, I see the palpitations in my stomach again, and I imagine giving birth to a bundle of flesh with no shape, to something entirely sealed in. An oily mass of meat with fists and heels and a skull without a single orifice. I feel a burning rush of nausea again. I get up onto my feet. I mean, this is really, really powerful writing. And again, one of the best directors of horror, David Cronenberg, if he gets his hand on this book, maybe I should send it to him. I don't know him personally. I sent it to
I
his
was going
agent.
to say, can you
I'm going to do
can
that.
you page him,
Naomi,
Drax?
I'm just going to send it to him. I'm just going to go to whatever film festival he shows up and say, you got to read this. And then we got get the ball rolling. Now you have prepared an excerpt. So what are you going to read for us?
I'm going to read the very start of the narrative, When Alice and Pete arrive new home, they're leaving the big city. And then I'm going to read from just a little further in where Alice is reflecting on skin, on her skin, and on what's beginning to affect.
Oops, now we lost sound again, unfortunately. Let me, I think we have an issue here with Google Meet.
Google Meet.
Let's bring up the sound in Second Life. Isabel, who's running sound, please bring it up in Second Life and then we'll put that on the stream. For now, that's fine. Let's give Isabel a quick minute here to bring up the sound. So this is right at the beginning. This is actually a fictional. I said this before. This is a fictional town in Australia. This is really interesting that you said this in Australia and in a fictional town. I guess you didn't want to offend anybody. I don't know. I mean, what was the? Why did you set it in a fictional town?
Well, it is Australia and it's not Australia, so that's why I wanted it to be a fictional town
Ah,
because, excuse me, it's not a realist work of fiction, I suppose. So unlike Exit Management, where I tried to be faithful to certain details of the city of London, I was pretty free and easy with the location in Sealed, which I suppose I hope is working in a slightly more almost mythological way, at least in my imagining of it. So it is inspired by the Blue Mountains, but it also is an alternate version, I suppose, of that world.
I think that's what threw me that the Blue Mountains um, identified as Australia, but you're not.
Mm.
Okay. I
Mm.
think we have good sound. So Isabel, please bring it up and let's read from the beginning of Sealed.
Okay, thank you, Drax. We
We
came out
came out
here to
here to
begin
begin
again.
again.
We came out
We
here for
came
the
out
clear,
here
for the
for the
clear,
clear air.
and a fresh start. Beware of fresh starts. No one said to us, God knows what will begin. Pete found the house online, Mountain View pictures, but it looked so good. A whole house, the kind you can only dream of in the city, with scrubbed wooden floors, a bright enamel kitchen, a veranda with views across the valley. So we took the risk, put down the deposit sight unseen. The drive out took longer than we thought, and by the time we arrived, the van was already parked up in the driveway. The sun was going down, though it was still light enough just to see. I sat in the passenger seat for a while as Pete helped the removal men. It was pretty in an implausible way, like a house in a picture book or a holiday brochure. A white chalet edged with dark-leafed tropical plants. Behind the house, I could see the outline of the mountains in the distance, greying in the dusk, and nearby, lights glimmering in the valley bottom. We never had asked why the house was suddenly vacant, so cheap. It's best not to pry, Pete says. It's best not to worry. It'll be nothing, he says. A redundancy, a divorce, a clean, old-fashioned death. By the time I get out of the car, the blokes have already started carrying our boxes into the house. Lights inside of the porch. Do the plants look weird? It's been a while since I've seen anything this lush. To check that they're real and they're waxy and cool like synthetic matter, but they tear through when I push with my nail. The blooms are enormous, frilly and faintly obscene. I can hear my mother's voice in my head, naming them for me. gardenia, hibiscus, angel ivy. Their fragrance follows me, sweet and morbid on the cooling evening air. When I get inside, Pete grabs my hand, pulls me into the living room, and points to a large box. Here, he says, you can sit on this until we get the chairs out. I've been sitting all day. I say, I want to look around. Not while this is going on, he says. I don't want anyone to bump our bump. He leans down and kisses my swollen stomach. And this is ever so slightly later in the novel, when they're driving back from one of their first trips into the nearby town. I remember when my skin seemed like magic. We're in the car driving back to the new house, and Pete's singing along to something on the stereo as he drives, and I'm looking at my fingers, at the tiny scuffs of skin around a nail where I've caught the cuticle with my teeth and sheared away a stretch of it. Pinpricks of old blood just below the nail bed, and the skin around them is roughed up in tiny bristles. That skin must be dead, and in a few days the pinpricks of blood will be completely gone. My skin will have secretly, magically crept across the wounds, knitting itself back together again. Your skin is ever so clever, my mother used to say when I was a child and had cut myself. It's like a layer of magic around you. And the steps at school and cut my knees badly, jewelled with blood and grit. She picked the wounds clean with tweezers, something that stung so sharp it made me giddy, and then she covered me in fabric sticking plaster. We'll check again, she said, and we did. We checked together, sitting on the edge of my bed, and it was like lifting the lid on an experiment. The first time we looked, the wounds were still wet, but a few days later, even the worst of the cuts was starting to heal, the flesh beneath dulled to purple, the skin settling back into a dry gauze of grazes. In another few weeks, both knees had scabbed over, and then a few weeks down the line, nothing. No sign of anything, nothing left of the injury at all. My knees had sealed back over, the new skin clean and soft and supple. A girl at my school who got burned by a firework. Everyone knew the story. It had crackled its way around the schoolyard. A rocket had gone off in the Bardies' backyard on New Year's Eve, only it had fallen on its side after Mr. Bardie lit the fuse, spinning out of control, bouncing off the walls and chasing the whole family back into the house. Then it burst in through the window, spearing Lena in the thigh. Prettiest, liveliest girl in our class. Dark skin and tall, her limbs always draped around her friends. Afterwards, for a long time, she was jittery. She startled at loud noises in the playground. But eventually, we saw her skin work its magic. They gave her grafts, taking flesh from her buttocks and plying it back into her thigh. In PE, we caught glimpses of the large cotton pads that she wore under her school skirt and speculated on what was underneath. And when the day came, a year or so later, that the pads were gone, we gathered around her in silence. Skirt slowly. Her dark skin gleamed. Her outer thigh curved ever so slightly inwards where it had once bowed out, meshed back together, a pale lattice of new scars. Smiled, laced her arm around her best friend's neck again. That was the old magic. Times I can't depend now on the old magic of skin, on the secrets of healing. Our skin is a hex on us now. It turns our bodies to puffs of smoke, choking out their own fires. These are the thoughts I'm not meant to have, us to leave behind. Here we are, babe, up in front of the house. Welcome home. I feel the tiny scuffs of skin around my nail. I press them down with my thumb. Mend quick and clean. O Lord, keep me safe from harm. O Lord, keep me safe from my skin.
And that's Naomi Booth reading from Sealed. Again, if you are into this type of, if you're not afraid of, you can always put it down if it's too much, but powerful, powerful story, really going deep into this exploration of us in our bodies, enclosed in our bodies, trapped in our bodies. Um, the only place where we're not trapped in our bodies is, of course, Second Life, where we can have our own bodies and we can
Mm.
reinvent our bodies. Am I right?
Yeah.
Ah, hmm That's why this
Yeah.
type of horror does not compute here. But I actually have to say, Pete, the way it starts, Pete is really actually not that bad. So I'll take back a few of the things that I said. Um, yeah. Now we have just 4 minutes left, so I have to do the credits as well. So I want to um, very briefly talk about your your first novella that was published by a publisher that publishes poetry,
Mm.
and the lost
Yeah.
art of sinking, which again has an interesting.
Hmm.
You're drawn to these dark topics, I suppose. That is about a person that tries different ways to pass out.
Yeah, that's right. I'm not going to
Why?
waste time
Why?
trying to sit down. I'm
Oh,
just
just
gonna,
right. No,
yeah,
you did a good job. Just right click and sit down. No, no, no. That's you're an expert.
go. There we go.
There you go.
Beautifully, beautifully executed.
Now, why do people always have to be so self-destructive, Naomi? Is that a Yorkshire thing
Oh my goodness.
because of the
I don't think
bleakness of
it is a
Yorkshire?
Yorkshire thing. Interesting you say that that's self-destructive. Yeah. So the novella, The Lost Art of Thinking, is about a character who does compulsively pass out. So she becomes uh, almost addicted, if you like, to the process of losing consciousness. But let me tell you that that book started almost as a kind of work of satire, in my mind at least.
Hmm.
At the point that I was writing it, um, uh, and you'll have to tell me if this was the case in Germany. I'm interested to hear. At the point that I was writing it, 50 Shades of Grey, selling book in the UK. In fact, not there was a point where it was not just the best-selling book. The trilogy occupied number one, number two, and number three for months. So it was, an enormous best-selling erotic fiction, erotic romance series. And I was one of the things that interested me about this series of novels, apart from all the controversy about it, being about a kind of relationship that a woman has with a powerful rich man, kind of reprising all of those cliches of romance fiction, I suppose, is that there was a lot of swooning in it. There was a lot of fainting in it. So
Hmm.
the female character, Anastasia Steele, who is this kind of young, virginal character who falls in love with this older man, she passes out all the time. And I found this kind of hilarious. It did seem to be a almost parodic itself, a bit of a parody of of earlier versions of overwhelmed femininity. And I just thought, what would it be like to have a character who passed out all the time, but the romance is really with herself? This is not a kind of, she's not swooning
Hmm.
um in a romantic sense. She's actually kind of really interested in out of body experiences and intoxication and everything that might come from near death experiences as well. So it might seem like quite a dark premise, but there is a bit of playfulness there. This is my attempt to write to write a
No,
romance,
this is
or
great,
to
but yeah, no, I
to
get it.
kind
I
of
mean, this is
um,
absolutely she's taking matters into her own hands. She's not swooning for
yeah,
just anybody. She's just swooning for herself. That's brilliant.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So that's kind of the premise, and I guess that one of the reasons that it was published by Penned in the Margins, who are a brilliant publisher of innovative poetry, is that it's quite an unusual prose text. It's not highly plotted. It's not it is. Quite a weird bit of prose in that it doesn't have the arc of a novel, for example. It does simply follow this kind of sequence of her escalating activities in terms of passing out. And when I first
mm,
wrote it, I almost thought of the structure as being like a kind of series of musical variations. So I think for some readers that's quite frustrating because it doesn't that you might hope for. Um, and I
this
partly want
is
to
not
say
this
some
is
of
not
that's
our
deliberate,
audience.
but
Naomi, this is not our audience is exactly your audience. We like to be surprised.
wonderfully
We like to be
open-minded,
enlightened.
excellent.
Absolutely. Jerry McNally says here, and this is another Cronenberg, J.G. Ballard Crash.
Mm,
He mentions here,
gosh, yeah.
also made into a film by Cronenberg. And Jessica mentions here, I think in regards to 50 Shades of Grey, we don't burn books, but we could make an exception for that one. I couldn't tell how
Yeah.
this was received in Germany. I was in America at the time, and
Right.
I never read it. I never went near it. I felt the way it was described to me, also primarily in terms of the writing style, and my audience knows that I'm an unapologetic elitist when it comes to good writing and prose. I just I left bad prose behind me. I can't stand it, and what I read about it was like, I'm not interested because it's just not well written. Basically, is what
Yeah,
I'm trying to say.
it is quite. I mean, I read all three, which I was for research purposes. I hasten
Aha!
to add, but it
That's
is
why I'm
quite
reading
hard to
Ayn
take.
Rand. Yeah. It's hard to, yeah,
the
really, like it's really, yeah.
well, I was just beginning to teach creative writing, and I found it quite hard to uh, encourage students to make their prose better when something where the prose clearly hadn't had a lot of time and effort spent on it was doing so
So
amazingly
well,
well. But
absolutely.
yeah, I
This
think
is
that
why,
was a
and I mean,
mass.
any student would go like, hey, wait a minute, they're making the big bucks here. I don't really need to kind of hone my craft.
There's a lot of holy cows and holy shit in the book in the dialogue. But she she's they've done very well. They've connected with a lot of readers, and I think also it was one of those books that people wanted to read just to know what all the fuss was about. I
Yeah.
think it was successful also in that sense of people wanting to have a take on it, and quite a lot of people actually enjoying reading it in order to critique it as well. So I think you got quite a lot of hate readers for 50 Shades of Grey.
It's fine. We don't discriminate. It's fine. And again,
Yeah.
I'm only speaking about me. As everybody knows, I grew up with Conan the Barbarian, and my mother was horrified not only about the one-dimensional depiction of women and relationships between men and women and such, but also the language. She wanted me to read Thomas Mann, but I was only 6 years old. I'm joking. I was 12. But in any event, we have to wrap it. People can stick around and hang out and speak. Of course, what we did not mention, and not of course, but because unfortunately, because I'm not a good time manager, despite being German. We didn't talk about your Guardian article about swooning and your academic work, which is coming up. I put the article here in the local
Mm.
chat. Jessica here in the audience is a big fan of of you based on this article. She told me earlier,
Oh,
which
thanks,
is
Jess.
very cool. So this whole swooning, Jessica faints slowly because I'm too fabulous to hurt my avatar. Uh, I gotta wrap it. I gotta wrap it. We can hang out. The Club Budapest is not going anywhere. Thank you so much, Naomi. It was a
Oh,
real
thank
pleasure.
you.
I, in,
Thank you so much for having me and for the amazing audience for joining us in this beautiful room.
big thanks to the audience. This we have more rooms we can spread out to if we want. In this Club Budapest, real pleasure. The work is incredible. We're streaming this on my channel, youtube.com/Draxtor. You can find a lot of my other Second Life work there. The Second Life Book Club happens every when does it happen? Every Wednesday at 12 o'clock Pacific time. I forgot my own time zones. The email is slbookclub@draxter.com, and you can write with suggestions or with critique as well. The show is produced by Isabel Sharin, Shyla the Super Gecko, and myself. The location manager, master builder is Ruby Geek. Ruby went all out. Please, I'll say this again at the very end, tip the volunteer staff. There's a tip jar right next to Naomi here on the stage. Special thanks, Marianne, Arduin, AJ, Patch, and Brett, and Theanine, all the moles over at Linden Lab. They don't show up anymore, but they need to be thanked. We have a lot of sponsors. That means we get free materials to outfit the show and these avatars, and all these wonderful artists are all around the place here. The tip jar was made by Silas Merlin. It's a special tip jar. And again, please do tip the volunteer staff. You can find a calendar online. You can find a Discord channel where you can talk about books. Please post your snapshots on Flickr. You can ask Jared the bot. Also, you can send feedback to Jared. And yeah, that's it for the show. Next week, of course, and this is very interesting. This was not done with any planning, but next week we're talking about body horror with three
Really?
authors. And yeah, there's an anthology that came out edited by Ellen Datlow. It's called Body Shocks, and we have Simon Bestwick, Cody Goodfellow, and Karen Warren come and talk about body horror. And then the week after that, it's Ellen Datlow, the living legend um, of horror editing, and that's right here.
Fabulous.
Yep, we continue with the horror. And Naomi, you can come here, and then you will say, well, Naomi, the new kid on the block, we've been writing body horror for years, but she's so good. How come? That's not fair. And that's all
I
happening.
promise I won't.
Sorry,
Promise I won't heckle. I was just going to say, I promise I won't heckle other authors when I come along.
you will intimidate them. Uh, and 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 this is how we wrap the show. Thank you so much again for watching this, YouTube folks, and people here in the room. We'll see you next Wednesday right here on the Second Life Book Club.